Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this author interaction of the 2025 NLF Reading Challenge. My name is Sneha. I'm delighted to be here today, and I hope you are too. Before we begin the interaction, let me give you a brief introduction about the NLF Reading Challenge, followed by a few housekeeping rules for today's session. The NLF Reading Challenge runs from May to August 2025 for students between grades 4 to 6 on the competitive as well as the non-competitive tracks. Participants read a curated set of 30 books. They discuss their reading with their friends, their team members, and their guide, log their thoughts, and get to interact with the authors of some of these books online. For today's event, please use the Q&A box to type out your questions or your responses to what's being discussed during the session. If you're from a school, please mention the name of your school and your city. And today, we are privileged to have with us the best-selling author and Newbery honoree, Jasmine Warga. Jasmine is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of middle grade novels, Other Words for Home, The Shape of Thunder, and A Rover's Story, as well as young adult novels, Here We Are Now, and My Heart and Other Black Holes. Her book, Other Words for Home, has won several awards, including a John Newbery Honor, a Walter Awards Honor for Young Readers, and a Charlotte Huck Honor, while Here We Are Now and My Heart and Other Black Holes have been translated into more than 25 different languages. However, initially, Jasmine didn't quite believe she could really be an author because she never read stories about girls like her. But she now feels inspired to write books that will help other young people feel empowered to tell their own stories. She also strongly believes that everyone should have the opportunity to see diversity in their literary protagonists and heroes, and that we all gain empathy and insight from reading outside of our own experience. Jasmine joins us today to speak about her book, A Strange Thing Happened in Cherry Hall, which is her middle grade novel and is on the reading list of the challenge. It is a whimsical, moving story about the universal desire to be seen and understood, and how art can help us find connection even when we are at our loneliest. Welcome, Jasmine. We're very happy to have you with us today.
Thank you so much.
Jasmine, before we begin, would you want to start with a short reading from the book?
Yeah, I would love to do that. So I'm going to just read the first 2 chapters from A Strange Thing Happened in Cherry Hall. Chapter 1, in which the turtle is introduced and a painting is stolen. Our story might not truly begin with the turtle, but I'm going to start there. The turtle in question is named Agatha. Her name was given to her by a human who had noticed her existence. Most humans did not notice her existence. Agatha is important to our story because she lives in the garden behind the Penelope L. Brooks Museum. In the warmer months, she moves slowly, very slowly. She is, after all, a turtle, nibbling on food left over by picnicking families. During the summer, the garden behind the Penelope is a very popular picnic spot. Occasionally, a human will spot Agatha and clap with delight, but mostly she is left alone. In the winter, she tunnels underground to hibernate and to stay away from the cold. Turtles prefer going underground to wearing winter coats. The day the painting was stolen from the museum was the warmest day that Maple Lake had had so far that year. The sun beamed down on the garden. That heat and goldenness radiated into Agatha's burrow. A warm, bright wedge of sunlight woke her up. She crawled very slowly out of the burrow. She happened to emerge at just the moment that the robber was scurrying away with the painting. She saw the culprit. Agatha noticed many things about the thief. She noticed their height, their clothes. She noticed how quickly they moved. Turtles are good at noticing. But she also noticed that the sun that had felt so warm in her burrow didn't feel quite as warm up here above ground. She tucked herself back into her burrow. She would wait for warmer weather. And that's the first chapter. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Jasmine. It's always a pleasure to hear an author read out aloud from their book. On to the questions now. Our first question is on the themes in the story. While at a first glance, it's tempting to think that a strange thing happened in Cherry Hall is about mystery and a stolen painting, the more you delve into it, the more it seems that it's actually about connections and self discovery. Connections between persons of the same age and across ages, such as Rami and Veda, Theodore and Blue Hannah, Rami and his mom, and many such. And so, Amira Jivani from Fountainhead School, Surat, asks if you intended for this to happen, or was it a murder mystery in which the themes of connection and self discovery developed organically due to the flow of the narrative?
What an excellent and insightful question. And you are exactly right that to me, it is really a novel about sort of the mystery of figuring out who you are. I wanted to write a fun mystery novel when I was your age. I loved mysteries. And I got that idea to want to write a mystery novel from visiting lots of schools across my country. So I live in the United States of America and I do lots of school visits. And I was constantly being asked by kids, when are you going to write a mystery novel? And I thought this was such an interesting question. But then I started thinking about, how much I loved mysteries as a kid. And I realized that what I really wanted to write about, though, was that mystery of figuring out who you are and where you belong. Because when I was a kid, I was a really lonely kid. I was a really shy kid. And I think I wondered a lot about what it meant to belong somewhere, what it meant to feel like I fit in. And so to me, the book is both things, right? Hopefully, it is an appealing mystery, but it's also peeling back those layers and is about kind of, as you really beautifully put in your question, about kind of that mystery of connection and how do we build bonds with other people and how does that make us, stronger and better people for it.
How interesting to know about the evolution of the story and all these connections. Thank you. And so, talking about connections, the next question is about your connection with the story and if they have found a place in the book. Because a strange thing happened in Cherry Hall explores the universal desire to be seen and understood. And you briefly mentioned it now. But Samara Raval from Jamnabai Narsi School, Mumbai, wants you to talk a little bit more about your own experiences with feeling unseen and a love of mysteries, which helped shape the character of Rami and his journey of self discovery.
Another wonderful and insightful question. So, when I was a kid, I was definitely very shy. So my own background, my father is an immigrant from Jordan, the country of Jordan. He's a Palestinian immigrant from Jordan. And then my mom's family has been in the United States for a long time. And so growing up, I had this mixed background and I grew up in a really small town in the state of Ohio. And for those of you who don't know, that's a state in the middle of the country in America, kind of like rural farmland. And I was the only kid in my town who had a parent who hadn't been born in America. And so early on, I had all these questions about where I belonged and what my identity was. And I think I turned to books and writing as a way to make sense of that. Like I love to find myself in pieces of the characters that I read about. And that gave me sort of this understanding that even though my world in my small Ohio town was very small at that moment, that the world itself wasn't small. And that's what I love so much about reading. And I hope that's what you all are taking away from all of the wonderful books you're reading through this festival, that the world is really big, right? And so there's a place for everyone, and there's a place for you to find your belonging. And hopefully books are helping you to figure that out and that identity formation.
Thank you, Jasmine. That message does indeed resonate. There's a place for you as well as everybody in books. True. We would now like to talk to you about taking certain ideas in the story forward. Because in the story, secrets play a very significant role, not just in the mystery, but in shaping relationships and outcomes. So, Pavaki Mittal from Shiv Nadar School, Noida, wants to know your thoughts about how secrets can both unite and divide people. And what do you hope readers will take away about facing secrets in their own lives?
These are such beautiful questions. I just want to say that I'm so impressed with the depth of all these questions. And so, when it comes to secrets, well, I think that secrets can be really great confidants among friends when they're small secrets, right? Because it's a way of showing someone that you trust them. So maybe it's a secret of a crush that you have or something that you're a little bit embarrassed about, but want to share with your friend because having somebody else makes you feel less lonely. And so I think those kinds of secrets can be really special, or maybe even surprise secrets. Like maybe you and your sister are planning to give your mom a nice gift for her birthday and you're sharing that secret. And so I think those secrets are really great. I think the secrets that become harmful are when we keep parts of ourselves from the world because we don't trust that the world can handle who we are fully. And I think that in this book, Rami, he's hiding from the world, right? And because he's hiding from the world, he's not able to make those connections that he so desperately wants to make. And I think that that can be an interesting duality. And I recognize that as a shy kid myself, and that the more I kind of turtled into myself, excuse the pun, the more that I struggled to make connections. And so learning how to share and trust, I think, are really important. And so I think that some secrets, like we said, can be special and can be kind of a marker of friendship, but you don't want to keep yourself as a secret because other people want to get to know you.
True. Secrets, the keeping of them and the sharing of them is never easy, and we truly appreciate your sensitive approach to it. Thank you for writing that, Jasmine. And taking off from duality, which you spoke about, mm, Agatha is, I could confidently say, everyone's favorite character in the book, with a charming name, possibly a not Agatha Christie. Agatha the Turtle appears at key moments throughout the story. She first shows up near the beginning, like you read, seemingly by chance in search of sunlight, but her presence is more than chance. There's a striking parallel between a turtle, a reptile known for retreating into its shell, and Rami, who's emotionally withdrawn and living in a metaphorical shell of his own. And so, what inspired you to make a turtle such a central figure in the narrative?
Well, I was working on this book, and books are funny because you're kind of a collector, right? And so she wasn't initially in the book. And then I was just feeling stuck, and you want to feel a spark towards the story. And I was thinking, okay, what can I add in that's going to make me feel excited? Because part of being a writer is that you're not only the writer of the story, you're also the book's first reader. And you kind of have to appeal to your reader self. And I love an unexpected narrator. I love a character who feels a little bit like you wouldn't expect them necessarily to be in the story. I love an animal story. And then I realized that because of the themes we've been talking about before, a turtle would work really well. And so I decided, oh, there was a turtle there the night that the painting was stolen, and she knows. Because really, to me, the book is really about what does it mean to see other people and to be seen. And I think a turtle is a creature who oftentimes isn't seen. And what can you see when other people aren't watching or noticing? And you're absolutely correct that her name is a nod to Agatha Christie.
Oh, thank you. This use of metaphor actually is one of the most profound yet enjoyable part of the story. So thank you for writing it, Jasmine. Now, moving ahead from the analysis of characters, we have a very interesting question from Aisha Sial from the Sri Ram School, New Delhi. She asks, when you write books, do you ever write scenes or stories about your characters that don't end up in the book? If yes, what is your favorite extra scene you have written about Rami or Veda that did not make it into the story?
That is another great question. So I do sometimes do this. Lots of times it's not intentional. Like sometimes it is because you're trying to figure out, who your character is. And then you do some side writing to try to like puzzle that out and figure out who your character is and put them in unexpected situations so you can get to better know them. But in terms of Rami and Vita, I had a couple of extra adventures that they go on, not just the bus, and those scenes have been elongated. And just because of the way novels need to be paced and what was best for the story, that got trimmed down. But I love their interactions together. And so I think they both make each other really come alive on the page. And so those scenes I really enjoyed writing. And I think I got to know both of them better from writing those scenes, even though they didn't end up in the book.
I wish we could read those scenes too. A lot of fun. And now it's time for a live audience question. And this is from Shanvi Shah from Ahmedabad International School. And Shanvi asks, why did you particularly choose Veda to be a partner with Rami in this mission? They have such different personalities, and yet Rami chooses to be friends with her.
So, it's actually because they have such different personalities. So when I do school visits, I love to ask kids, raise your hand if you have a friend who would you describe as being different from you? And you see lots of hands raised. And I was that way as a kid. I think sometimes we have this false understanding that friendship needs to be about finding people who are like you exactly. And I don't think that's true. I think what friendship is about is finding people that can celebrate you for who you are and you can celebrate them for who they are. And you help to make each other better and bring out different parts of yourself. So I think that Vita makes Rami more adventurous and braver. And Rami makes Vita a little bit more thoughtful and curious. And I think together they're a really great team. And so that's kind of what I wanted to show through them. And I think it's also really fun to write characters who are different because they help to bring out each other's personalities. If you have characters who are all really similar, they can start feeling really one note on the page because everyone is going to have the same reaction to a different situation. But you want one character who, if they're up high, is nervous, and another character was like, can we go higher? And that tension is going to help a narrative.
True, and that's a lovely tip for our budding writers to build their tension with characters who are slightly different from each other. Thank you for answering that, Jasmine. And so let's move on to the narrative style of the story. There is this, just give me a second, yes. There is this voice full of dry humor, which is contained within parentheses, which pops up throughout the story. But the story itself is narrated in third person. Can you talk to us a bit more about this delightful mishmash of narrative styles? Was it a unique style that you deliberately adopted, or was it more happenstance?
Yeah, so it was more deliberate. I was thinking back to books that I had read when I was a kid, and there's this like classic narrative style in books for younger readers from a past generation, which is that third person omniscient voice that almost has a personality of its own, like because you feel like you're being told a story. And I love that because like my mom always read to me when I was a kid. And so this idea of stories being shared orally and the narrative voice feeling really like a storyteller. And so I wanted to harken back to that and try something different. Right now, at least in the United States, first person narratives are really, really popular. And I've written a lot of first person narratives. I love first person too. But I wanted to try something different. I wanted to stretch myself and I wanted to kind of sort of give an ode to those third person books and that narration style that I had, loved as a kid. Like I'm thinking back to, like the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler, where you feel like you know Claudia so well, but that book is really told in third person and it feels like this other person who knows what's going on. And I think that's a big charm of that story.
Yes, and with this story, it felt like you were with us when we were reading it, and you were sitting right next to us, and we were reading it together, and that's such a whimsical, charming addition to the story. And so, thank you. Um, Now moving on to questions about art, because art plays such an important role in the story on various levels. The humans, the ghostly Hannah and the turtle Agatha, find and foster connections through the painting, Untitled. So Suhani Gupta from the Sriram School, Aravali, Gurgaon, and Tavish Agarwal from the Shivnadar School, Noida, want to know more about the role art can play in life and about making connections. Why do you think art can connect people even at their lowest?
What another beautiful, thoughtful question. I just want to say once again how impressed I am with the depth of your questions and the way all of you think about the world. And so, art is something that's really important to me. Like my own family, we live in Chicago, which is a city in the US, and we're lucky enough to have a really big art museum here. And we try to go at least once a month because I think art is kind of what helps us process what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to feel pain? What does it mean to feel happiness? And I think art makes us feel represented, right? If you see yourself in a story, it makes you feel less alone, knowing that somebody else maybe has been through something similar or has felt that way. And so I wanted to play with all of those things. I also think that art is a mystery in itself. I love looking at paintings and thinking not just what do I see in this painting, but what did the painter see? Why did they make this painting? What was going on in their life that compelled them to make it? And I think that's such a rich, fertile ground for storytelling because there's always the story behind the art, right? And so I wanted to play kind of with all of those elements. And I think that I hope all of you understand that even if you don't grow up to make art professionally, you're all artists. I think that part of being human is making things and creating things. And this is a conversation I have with my own kids all the time where they have a really narrow idea of what art is. They think of like just fine art, like painting or ceramics. But there's, being a writer, being a musician, acting, all these things are forms of art. And I think that we're richer people when we engage with that. And so I wanted to write a book that kind of celebrates that and celebrates the way that art connects us. Like right now, books are connecting all of us. And so that's just something that's personally important to me. But also when it comes to my own writing process, visual art is really important to me because I think that so much of writing is being a language artist. You are painting pictures with words. And so you want to see something really clearly in your own brain so that you can hopefully choose the right words to get somebody else to see it. And I think visual art is really inspiring to help me better picture what it is that I want the reader to try to picture.
Thank you. That's a term I'm not going to forget anytime soon. Language artist. That's such a lovely term. We also have one more question from the audience here. Shivansh Singhania from the Sriram School, Maulsari, asks, why did you name the painting Untitled?
I think that goes kind of with the quirky whimsiness that we were talking about with the narrative. Like I wanted to talk about too how I think certain pieces of art are really famous and really celebrated. And then in the museum, you have those other paintings that people just walk by and don't think that much about. And so I thought that that was interesting. I also thought that that led to this mysterious idea of maybe this painting wasn't fully completed, or maybe it wasn't meant to be on display. And what does that mean? When is a piece of art ready? When is a piece of art intended for public consumption? And what does the title tell us about that? And here's a challenge for all of you. The next time you go to an art museum, try and see if you find a piece of art where the title is untitled. I bet that you will. That's actually a pretty common thing to come upon in a museum. And so I wanted to sort of play with that idea.
We keep our eyes peeled. Thank you, Jasmine. We have another question from Vanij Jain, Nehru World School, and Vanij is in the audience now. He wants to know if you ever heard about a painting that got stolen, which then inspired this book.
Great question. So yes, so the Mona Lisa is one of the most famous paintings, and it was famous before its theft, but it became much more famous after its theft. And there's actually a really wonderful book that I would recommend to all of you that's a nonfiction narrative book for kids called Vanish, that's about the theft of the Mona Lisa. But actually, the art theft that most inspired a strange thing that happened in Cherry Hall is the art theft that happened at the Isabella Gardner Museum in Boston in the United States. And so this art heist is really famous in the United States because it's still unsolved to this day. And what happened is that in the middle of the night, people dressed in police uniforms knocked on the side door of the museum. And the security guard, thinking that they were police, just let them in. And they ended up tying up the security guard and then robbing the museum. But they robbed the museum in a really interesting way. They cut the paintings directly out of the frames because if they had lifted the paintings off the wall, a quiet alarm would have sounded calling the actual police. So whoever robbed the museum knew a lot about the museum's security system to come up with all of these things. And the other really interesting thing is that they took some art that was like already very famous, and then they took some really random art, and I wanted to play with that of like why people steal certain pieces of art and who would have done that. And I'm just fascinated by this mystery. It's still unsolved to this day. There's a really great documentary on Netflix about this art heist. And it's one of those mysteries that kind of, at least in American culture, fascinates a lot of us. And so I wanted to kind of fictionalize that art heist in this book.
Wow. Another question about inspirations. This is from Yana Narayanan from Vidya Shilp School, Bangalore. And she asks, is HF Bottom Tower inspired by a real person, perhaps a real artist?
She's kind of an amalgamation. One of my favorite artists is Georgia O'Keeffe. And when I was working on the book, I was lucky enough to visit the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, New Mexico, here in the United States, which Georgia O'Keeffe spent a big chunk of her career in the American Southwest. And so her kind of the big museum that's kind of an I guess houses a lot of her works is there in Santa Fe. And she said lots of really interesting things about art. So one of her famous quotes is she says that art isn't about replicating something, it's about trying to get somebody else to have a feeling. So it's like if you're drawing a tree, you're not trying to perfectly capture that tree. What you're trying to do is get somebody else to see the tree the way that you see the tree, to feel the feeling that you feel when you see the tree. And I think that's a beautiful way to think about art. It's the way that I think about writing. And it's also the way that I think about the painting in this book of what that painting was trying to do. And so I think a little bit about her. Also, funny enough, so she's described, right, as having this really short haircut. That is actually based off of an American writer named Donna Tartt, who writes books for grown-ups, but she has a very like iconic style. And so I kind of pulled that to create the character.
It's very interesting. And we have one question from Advita, who's also in the audience now. Advita is from Need Academy, and she wonders, how do you choose names for your characters? Are they connected to your life? And if so, why and how?
Yeah, so a lot of times I think about what the characters' parents would have named them. So, for example, Rami, his mom is an immigrant from the Middle East, and Rami is a pretty common Arabic name, but it's also pretty easy for English speakers to say, which is why like my name is Jasmine, because in Arabic it's Yasmin, but it translates very easily. And so my parents wanted a name that would translate easily. And the same for Vida, like that is she's Indian American in the book, and that is a name of one of my daughter's really close friends. And so I borrowed that name and was thinking again about these names that are popular, I think, in the US and immigrant communities for those reasons. And Agatha, like you said, is the nod to Agatha Christie. But a lot of times when I'm naming my characters, I'm thinking about what their cultural background is, and so why their parents would have chosen a specific name for them.
Thank you, Jasmine. This has been interesting. Unfortunately, we are reaching the end of time, so I'm going to have to ask you the last question um, about what happens in the story. Because Rami's mother creates puzzle like bird paintings for him to solve and find the real bird behind the puzzle. And so Tanaya Singh from Shivnadar School, Faridabad, wants to understand the significance of these paintings. Were they meant to inspire Rami in his approach to life, to solve his problems with patience and careful observation?
Another really deep and wonderful question. So to me, I think of the bird paintings as being kind of a metaphor for art in itself, that I think all of art is kind of a challenge to its viewer, right? To find what you're going to find. And so I think what really great art does and great books do is the viewer or the reader bring those works to life, right? And they might find things that even the artist didn't find. And so the artist buries things in certain ways, and then you get to put together that puzzle and those pieces. And hopefully that's a really satisfying feeling and makes you feel connected to the art and invites you in. And so I felt like the paintings were a way of kind of talking about that sort of magic alchemy that hopefully you've had the experience of standing in front of a painting and seeing something maybe that surprised you. So, for example, just last week, I was on vacation with my family and we were at an art museum and there was a painting and it showed a tiger in a cage and then a little girl looking at the tiger. But if you stared at it long enough, you saw there was another tiger far back that you might have missed. And my kids were fascinated by that and got such joy when they found that second tiger. And to me, that's what art is. It's always about looking for that unexpected thing or having that feeling of that click. And so to me, those bird paintings are like that you might first look at it and be like, oh, what is this? But then that satisfying feeling of finding the bird. And I think that clearly that's happening for all of you when you're reading books based on the depth of these questions, that you're making those mental clicks yourself. So thank you.
Thank you very much for speaking with us today, Jasmine. It's been an absolute pleasure. We wish you the very best with your upcoming book, The Unlikely Tale of Chase and Finnegan, which is coming out in March 2026. And so thank you, Jasmine.
Yes, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Our next interaction is with the best-selling author, Nazima Pathan, whose book, Dream Hunters, is a part of the reading list for the 2025 NLF Reading Challenge. This will take place on Thursday, August 7th, from 5:30 to 6 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Do keep an eye out for our email on this or follow our social media handles. We look forward to seeing you there. Until we meet next, take care. Happy reading.